Now, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance began a 4-day visit to India today. Vance received a red carpet welcome as he landed in New Delhi's Palam Air Force Station. The U.S. Vice President is accompanied by his family, including his wife, Usha, who is the daughter of Indian immigrants. Now, the three Vance children came out of the plane dressed in traditional Indian attire. Vance was welcomed by Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, a senior member of the Narendra Modi government. Vance also received the Guard of Honor at the airport as part of his official welcome. A troop of folk dancers greeted Vance and family after he stepped out into the sweltering sunshine of the Indian capital. Vice President Vance is scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi later in the day. Modi and Vance are expected to review the progress in bilateral relations and also exchange views on regional and global developments of mutual interest. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also host the U.S. Vice President and the Second Lady for a dinner at his official residence. Now, on the 22nd of April, the Vance family is visiting famous sites in Jaipur, including Amer Fort. Vice President Vance is also slated to speak at the Rajasthan International Center on India-U.S. relations under the Trump administration. On 23rd of April, the Vances will travel to Agra to visit the iconic Taj Mahal and Shubhgram, that is an open-air market showcasing Indian art and crafts. Now, they are also scheduled to be back to U.S. on April 24th. Meanwhile, there is an air of excitement at the village of Vadluru in Andhra Pradesh, which is the ancestral home of Usha Vance, the Second Lady of the United States.
Around 80 years ago, they had lived in the village for 50 years before leaving. Usha Chilukuri's grandfather, Ram Sastry, was a well-educated and respected priest. He used to share stories from history and Hindu mythology, and all the villagers would gain knowledge from him.
Now, with growing global tensions, particularly in the U.S.-China trade war, the visit is crucial as both nations seek to solidify their partnership in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, this visit underscores the strengthening of ties between the U.S. and India, with both countries aiming to increase bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030.
Four-year period. It was a very interesting period indeed. I watched it.
All right, for more on this, our assistant editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibal, is joining us live right now. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we did see and we did talk to you when Vance landed in India and was welcomed with cultural dances. What is next up for Vance, if you could give us the itinerary?
Well, the U.S. Vice President will be meeting the Indian Prime Minister later in the evening, approximately around 6 to 6:30 p.m. local time, Indian Standard Time. He had earlier been to Akshardham Temple in Delhi, and we know that it's a 4-day visit where he goes to Jaipur and Agra, as well as you've already pointed out. But his visit is seen as a symbolic visit in terms of strong India-U.S. relationship. I do not remember the last time a U.S. Vice President visited India so early on in his tenure. But remember, the position he holds, the position of U.S. Vice President, it's largely a ceremonial position with not much of power. But of course, he is seen as potential heir to the Trump legacy, and that is why this visit is significant. He could, of course, stand for the next US elections. That is something that is a buzz as well. But nonetheless, it is his India connect through his wife, Usha Vance, her Indian ancestry, which is much talked about. Also, of course, his children, all of them reached India in the Indian attire. But all in all, this is a visit that shows that how there are multiple level engagement between the two sides, whether it's the DNI chief Tulsi Gabbard visiting India last month, whether it's the Indian Prime Minister traveling to Washington in February, or whether it is the upcoming visit of the US President Donald Trump for the Quad Summit that could happen in the second half of this year here in India.
Absolutely, Siddhant. And it's interesting that you pointed out how a lot of things is happening, including the trade wars. And just recently, China has warned countries against striking a broader economic deal with the U.S. And it's interesting how striking it is, and the visit all coming at the same time.
Well, yes, of course, trade issue is something that is global talk of the town, to use the phrase. But essentially, we know when it comes to India, currently there is a certain pause on the reciprocal tariffs, which is for all the countries, barring, of course, China. And this time is being utilized by both the Indian side and the American side to chalk out a trade deal, something that was announced during Prime Minister Modi's visit to US. We could see the trade deal coming into being by the fall, by September, and that will be crucial as an important step forward in the relationship. But it's just not trade, but it is also defense relationship. Plans are out for chalking out a 10-year defense agreement between India and the US. The US Defense Secretary could also travel to India next month. Also, we know that people-to-people relationship forms the bedrock of the relationship. Many Indian Americans call America their home. Usha Vance is an example. Kamala Harris previously was another example. There are, of course, other important politicians who are Indian Americans, and that forms a living bridge between the two countries.
Right, and of course this also indicates, as you had earlier told us about, like Trump's visit to India. What more can you tell us about that?
Can you repeat your question?
Absolutely. So, of course, we know that you had earlier mentioned that his visit is like a pre-visit of the before President Trump visits India.
Well, yes. The US President Donald Trump will be traveling to India, and this visit is seen as a visit that paves the way for the larger visit of the US President Donald Trump. Donald Trump came last in India in 2019, and he was given a grand welcome. We all remember the visuals from the Namaste Trump event in Ahmedabad. He traveled to Taj Mahal as well in Agra. Now, of course, JD Vance travels to Agra as well later this week. But essentially, we know that the high-level engagement between the two sides have massively increased. We do expect the U.S. Secretary of State to also travel to India. In fact, the US NSA was expected to travel to India this week. Mike Waltz was expected to travel to India this week, but that hasn't happened, perhaps because of the Signal Gate incident. But it looks like that is not going to dampen the mood in terms of the relationship. This is a relationship that is forging ahead, full speed ahead in every possible way and in every possible domain.
All right, well, we will be looking at how that turns out, Trump 2.0 and Prime Minister Modi 3.0 perhaps. We'll be looking at that, but thank you so much for bringing us the latest. And of course, we'll get back to you when we get more updates on the visit.